You can still.
We're being recorded, people.
It's Big Brother.
Big Brother.
Always watching.
Brother.
Anita!
No. So we're going to talk about the story of Melloi Zeppelin.
I think for once I'm actually not being the ass here in this scenario.
Alright, so first thing I want to bring up, I actually super like that there's like a full 6 episode arc in this show.
Yes.
Like, first of all, also, I would like to point out that the entire 14 episodes is one overarching arc, if you look at it the right way. Like, this is all leading up to the same conclusion. But there's also, like, a very specific 6 episode arc. 6 episodes is a lot to dedicate to a single arc in a 14 episode anime.
There is actually a really interesting reason for that. Most of this anime is anime only.
Yes, I saw that when I was looking up the Type Moon C Wikia.
That 6 episodes is legitimately one arc from the novels, and everything else was them because they wanted to use that arc for very specific reasons. Mm-hmm. Everything else was them catching you up on the details you would need to know going into that arc. That's why it feels like it leads the details in.
That's also kind of why it feels like, at least for the first couple of episodes and leading up to this arc, that it feels very much kind of like one-off episodes. Like, you could kind of watch them in any order you want outside of that main arc.
I liked that, though. The first couple episodes were really fun.
Yes.
Like, there were some real amazing moments in the first couple episodes, and some of, like, the first five or 6 episodes, is it the first 6 or so that aren't part of the arc?
Yeah.
Yeah, the first 6 episodes were honestly, like, I really liked the Zeppelin arc, but those first 6 episodes were honestly fucking fantastic.
I figured you would love the Karnak episode, because that's like...
Yeah, but not even that. Like, actually, my favorite episode was the Wild Hunt. I really loved Karnak, but I also really loved the Wild Hunt. And actually, I can honestly say that every single one of those episodes, I can say that I loved them. Like, genuinely, when I said that this show it's like Yukoku no Moriarty, Ouran, and Babylonia had a baby. And all 3 of those are, like, in my top 10 favorite shows ever. So, like, this is, in my top 10 favorite shows ever at this point.
Yeah.
Like, this is fantastic. Like, I love the whole story with Melloi not being, like, this super strong mage, but, like, being, like, a detective. I mean, he's basically Sherlock Holmes, but fate.
I mean, it's... His entire thing is that he's trying to pay off student debt. Let's be honest. It's most relatable of all time.
Yeah. Seriously, that's why I say it's like Ouran, because he's basically a slave to the princess.
Yeah, but
Princess Melloi.
But he may not be like the strongest mage, but he's like a great teacher in the series.
Yeah, and a good detective.
And a great detective. So he may not be like an adept mage, but he's a very smart mage.
But it makes for a really good story because of that, because we're not watching a character who can absolutely do and solve all of these super easily. Like, he actually has to...
If the mage wants him dead, he's dead.
What Deadpool says? Maximum effort.
Yeah.
So... I love talking about this series, but I also wanted to. This might be a discussion very up Seki's alley, and this is not a problem I personally hold with the series, but I see it pointed out all the time. For a detective show, this does not follow a single one of the rules of detective novels.
Oh yeah.
Well, okay, it's interesting, right?
Yeah.
So I've read Sherlock Holmes. I've read some of Agatha Christie. I've watched Agatha Christie. I watch Yukoku no Moriarty right now, which is kind of a dark take on detective. And I think when moving a detective show into an anime, I don't think it should necessarily follow all the same rules, because I think the thing about a good detective story is it takes quite a while to tell, right? Mm-hmm. Like, it's not something you could cover in a single episode or 2 while actually managing to get, like, good coverage of all the bits. So I think in a lot of cases, we'll see him walking around, and he'll, like, when we were in the astronomancy mansion, over the death of the man who created his own death to become immortal. Spoilers.
Well, we're in the story section.
I know. But,
fuck you.
But there, he walks in and he looks at the body pieces and he's like, okay, I know what this is. And then he doesn't tell us. He goes and does something else that's unrelated. And I think in some ways that is quite indicative of the traditional detective story, because Sherlock Holmes doesn't necessarily...
That's the thing. I was going to say, it's the story-wise, it's a lot more of a callback to Sherlock Holmes than an Agatha Christie. Even though the last art, like the Rail Zeppelin itself, is a callback to Agatha Christie.
Yeah, where he's like gathering everyone together and then explaining out all of his steps in logic.
The actual structure of the story is a callback to Sherlock Holmes. With like as much as I think the name is stupid, the Dr. Heartless character is very much supposed to be the Moriarty pulling the strings throughout the series.
Yeah, and Sherlock doesn't necessarily explain to you all of his jumps in logic. You can see when he makes one, but he's not. The only way that he tells the audience in the books is when he tells Watson or the captain of the police or someone else. So if he doesn't tell anyone, we don't get to hear it until he's solved it when he's explaining what his logic conclusions were.
And that's why I don't mind it, because it's more, you don't want to, if you go into this expecting a mystery like Agatha Christie, you're going to be disappointed. But I think if you're going in expecting Sherlock Holmes, it's a fun series.
And you know what it also does? It doesn't set itself up as this is the main character, he solves crimes.
Yeah.
Like the solving crimes is something that he's just happening to do because, he
has a crippling debt that he needs to pay off.
Yeah, like he's not doing this because he's rich and high as a kite off of opium and alcohol,
Although he is developing a cigarette addiction.
This is true. And he's also not, Hercule Poirot traveling around the world being employed by governments to do this, as a job. This is just something that he's doing because he's being kind of told to do it and forced to. So I think it might not follow all the normal conventions, and it doesn't look like a Sherlock Holmes movie or an Agatha Christie movie. But it works in a 14-episode anime with one long arc that greatly resembles, and I'm going to say this straight out, that 6-episode Zeppelin arc, Murder on the Orient Express.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it.
Yeah, that's just it.
That's what I was saying. The last episode's just a call back to Agatha Christie.
Yeah, it's straight up Murder on the Orient Express.
Yeah.
And I love Murder on the Orient Express. The recent movie is fantastic.
And then there's another criticism that I'm going to try to gloss over a little here because I don't think anyone else... Like, I knew that I could engage in a good discussion with Seki there. This one's more... there are people who went into this when it first came out expecting a follow-up to Fate Zero, very dark, thematic show. And I think that's a bit unfair.
That first episode, he steps on the D4!
The what?
He steps on the D4!
Yeah. Wait, I
in the first episode, he runs into those people with the box, and the box spills. The box is full of nothing but D4 dice, the little pointy ones, and he steps on one.
So they certainly don't look like D4 dice, but you guys might appreciate this. To my understanding, those are, fun fact, we're playing a Fate D&D campaign. You know the fragments I give you?
Oh, is that what they are?
That's what those are.
Same board fragments?
They look like D4 dice.
Nice. I'm sorry. See, that's what I mean. Like, I'm glad this didn't take a super dark. I was worried about that when it first started because I thought it might. But there are so many moments of comedy, and not in that bad kind of comedy where they're just trying to shove in a comedic moment to lighten up a show, but in that good kind of comedy where, like, this is a serious show in a lot of ways, but this character is also absolutely an idiot at times, and so are some of the other characters, and we can see it. Like, they're competent, but they're idiots.
It has a very Lord Elmroy and his class of idiot children.
Yeah, and he keeps it up through, like, in the Zeppelin arc, there's that way he's 3 out of 10 when the girl tries to suggest something for the deduction. Yeah. And it's really funny that way, and I think that does it justice, because I don't think this show would have been as good if it tried to be super dark.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. Like, this show did not need to be that at all.
Yeah.
It's just the right amount of serious mixed with a small tinge of maybe slightly dark humor at times. But
add some spice.
Yeah, basically.
What's it?
Well, I mean, you know what? This is also an incredibly fulfilling character arc over 14 episodes. Yeah. Like, we go from, like, a character who is obsessed with this thing that happened 10 years ago to the point where he's not, like, living or experiencing the present in any way other than to pay back or do something related to that 10 years, to that fantastic ending dream with Iskandar.
Yeah, I love that ending.
I actually really love that arc throughout this show, because throughout, because this is where I do think it does work as a sequel to Fate Zero, is Waver or Melloi character arc. Because throughout the entirety of Fate Zero, Iskandar is basically beating him over the head, saying, "This is not the most important thing you're going to do in your life. Yeah. This is one single thing you're doing. Have higher expectations of yourself."
Yeah, and that I think that, you know what, if the only way to really communicate that as well as they did was how they did it. Like, he needed to meet Iskandar, even knowing that it was a figment of his imagination in a dream, and like be able to communicate that, you know? Like the invitation, like, are you gonna come join me? You know what? No, I'm enjoying my life now and I'm having fun. Yeah. It was like a realization. And then the next scene we see is him kind of walking into the classroom, looking up at his students and smiling.
Right.
One touch I like is that T-shirt he wears, like when he's just lounging around, like that is Iskandar's shirt, the one the giant hairy man has.
Yeah.
Now I think we're getting into characters of it, though.
Yeah.
So
I think,
well,
any final thoughts on the story?
So there weren't a whole lot of story arcs other than Zeppelin and the fact that it's overall.
It was just Zeppelin and the Wild Hunt was given an extra episode, I think.
Was Wild Hunt split into two?
There was the one where they first arrive at the manor and
okay.
Go out and it's the second one, Yeah,
so, but I mean, other than that, I mean, the story is amazing. You know, it's well put together, succinct in a single season, although if this ever got a second season, I would be incredibly happy. I'm
waiting.
I know. This needs a second season, guys.
I mean, I don't know. I'd like to leave it where it is, honestly, because, like, I mean, like, well, I'm sure they'd still put the same amount of effort in it. I think it works well as for what it is.
Yeah, but I want to know what happens to Dr. Heartless.
They definitely picked this specific arc for a reason. It is the arc that follows up the most on Fate Zero. It ties into Fate Grand Order.
Yeah.
It is the one that has the most to do with Iskandar and Waver. And it's definitely was picked strategically.
Yeah.
Like it was like that's why it feels like it's such a concise open and shut thing.
Yeah.
There are some aspects that I think get neglected in that. So I would love to see a second season, but I would not want that second season to really touch a lot of these same sort of beats.
Yeah, no. It would basically have to like further the connection of the overall story, I'd say.
Like I said, I would want to see more about what happens with Heartless. Like I'd like to see what his ultimate plan is in the end, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I'd like to know a bit more background about Gray, but
So, actually, you know, I'll save this for when we get to the characters arc. We'll go there.
Okay. Well, we'll see you in a couple of days to talk about characters.
Bye.
try hard.